Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. This is Cade Massey hosting this week, along with what should be the whole crew at some point. We've got 3/4 of the crew in here at the moment. Shane Jensen from his usual perch in Philadelphia. Adi Wyner on the road, as Adi is often on the road. In this case, he's being a road warrior, showing up after having traveled 36 straight hours. Adi Wyner, we're expecting nothing but clear, focused, intellectual horsepower after 36 hours of travel, as usual. We are going to
do my best, Kate.
Eric Bradlow is going to roll in. Speaking of traveling, Eric also traveling, but we think we're going to get him for part of the show. We'll take him whenever he arrives. We're going to run our usual format today. We'll do an interview in the first half of the show. We'll roll into an open topics, open lines in the second half of the show. We have back on the show a frequent guest, Ben Alamar. Ben, formerly of ESPN. He's also about as good as it gets when it comes to the world of basketball analytics. Ben even has his own book if you want to jump into sports analytics, writes and teaches on sports analytics. His book is Sports Analytics, a guide for managers, coaches, and other decision makers. But I would recommend it even to fans who want to get up to speed on sports analytics. Ben is based here with me in Austin, Texas. He plays around at the University of Texas as well as with other jobs that we'll leave silent for the time being. Ben, welcome aboard.
Great. Thanks for having me back. Really appreciate it.
Glad to have you. We are freshly into the third of 4 rounds of NBA playoffs. We started the Western last night. I think we're starting the Eastern tonight, maybe. Is that right? We've got San Antonio and Oklahoma City had a doozy of a game 1 last night. Cleveland, New York going to go off soon. Kind of a bruiser of an East Coast final. But we got to hear a little bit of your thoughts on the NBA in general, but especially coming out of this, these 2 high-powered teams, and especially Oklahoma City last night. And Wemby continues to emerge into what people thought he might be, I suppose.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible last night. I mean, both ends of the court. I think according to ESPN's net points metric, he had one of the top 1% defensive games ever in their data set.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And his 3-point shot from near the half court to keep them alive in the first overtime, just absolutely incredible. His impact on on the last end of the game and the 2 overtime periods, truly amazing performance by him.
Ben, can you tell us a little bit about that defensive metric? Do you know enough about it to talk about it? Like that's obviously a tough thing it's different than people scoring efficiency or whatever. What can you tell us about that defensive metric?
Yeah, so this is Dean Oliver's future Hall of Famer, Dean Oliver's.
There you go.
Metric, every time.
Yeah, good.
And basically, what it does is takes a look at the amount of credit, when something happens, how do we split that credit between all the players involved in it? So, when we know that Wemby was, when he's guarding somebody and we know the outcome of that possession, let's try and split that up between, Wemby, the shooter, the defense, the rest of the defense, all that kind of stuff, and sort of add all that impact up to get for a total net points created number for the entire game or season, what have you.
So does it consider things like proximity, or is it just is it some notion of who's guarding who?
It is based on sort of the identified matchup that is happening at that time. Okay. So they have Dean's got the player tracking data to identify who they think is guarding which player. It's an imperfect metric, measurement for sure, but it is absolutely part of how it works.
Does it capture Rick, one more follow-up, Adi, and then we're going to jump to you. Does it capture just? I suppose it captures attempts to score that are not successful, but also the absence of attempts to score. Because one of the things that happens around Wemby is people are scared to shoot.
Well, and that, absolutely, and that sort of kept them alive in the end of regulation. I think it was where Shea is driving. They have exactly what they would want. Shea's driving into the paint, and Wemby is there, so he decides to kick it out, and they miss the shot. So I think that piece is not part of this metric. Something actually has to affirmatively happen to measure in this context. But absolutely,
so it's underestimating. It was the top 1% ever, and it underestimates the impact.
Yeah,
I mean, plausibly, that is not a trivial. We're not sliding Dean or the analytics at all. We know that this is one of the challenges with analytics is that we don't capture well what doesn't happen, and yet that can be a big part of the game. That's a big part of the big man's defensive game.
Particularly for Wemby, because you can see what the Timberwolves were doing in the second round, just wouldn't take any shots anywhere near him. And we missed that.
Okay. Adi.
Yeah. So what you're describing is a metric that measures the defensive contribution on a game basis by kind of looking at the individual matchups. The standard way we measure defense would be some sort of regression adjusted plus minus, which probably works pretty well on the season level, because all that stuff that Cade's talking about that isn't measured gets captured by that in aggregate. So I guess my if there's a question at all here, it would be, are they complementary, or are they ultimately, if you had one, would you rather have the tracking based matchup version or the regularized, what we call RAPM? Some people put B's in front of it, Bayesian regression adjusted plus minus or something of nature.
Yeah, I think it's a question, a little bit of what you're trying to use the metric for. I think they can work in different different contexts really well. For example, like to measure impact in a game, I absolutely want the matchup level. And I think that looking at sort of an adjusted plus minus defensive metric, once you have enough sample size and so you feel confident it's a good estimate, then that tells you something, and then the sort of matchup base helps explain some of the why, and then you can see if there's what else of the why that is forming the defense, the adjusted plus minus metric. What are we not capturing in that matchup based metric? And I think that's seeing those differences is always really interesting, and trying to dive into those.
But I just think that Wemby's RAPM numbers are sick. I mean, it's not like it's very transparent what he does to the defense.
So, what's your sense of how much data is required before these good plus minus? This is basically a plus minus. You're talking about a very fancy plus minus, but hockey was the first with plus minus, as far as I know. Back in the day, it was like the stat in hockey. But the guys in hockey told me, those are so noisy. You need like years of data before plus minus means something. Presumably, with the Bayesian and the regularized and all that, you can get to something stable quicker. But how much? I've always been kind of cautious about plus minus because of how much data is required. How much until you're confident, Adi?
So I'll just comment. I mean, there's a lot more scoring in basketball. So you have way. It's like not comparable. I mean,
basically scoring level.
Yeah. So the real issue is diversity. So it only works if you have a variance, right? So if Wemby always played with one other player who was equally good or better, not really, but then you just couldn't. You would have what we call an identifiability problem. So the adjusted plus minus is there to disentangle the confounders, and that's only possible if you have variance. And if variance only happens when in weird situations where the game's over, whatever it is, garbage time or whatever, then you're not really getting a full accurate picture, and you're just essentially biased. But I think with basketball, with a little bit of variance, players coming in and out, and I don't think you'd be wrong if you'd attribute most of the main effect of suppressing defense to Wemby, but you have to have some control group. You have to have him not playing so you can see what happens, and that's part of it. But I think it probably converges pretty. I wouldn't say quickly, but I think by the end of the season, it probably works. So I'll fire off an email and try to get a better answer from people who actually do this for a living.
I'll also, I think, contribute a little bit more. I think the substitute. I mean, maybe Ben, you've got thoughts on this. I think the player substitution mechanism in basketball is a little bit more random. Like in hockey, they come in lines, where there's a sign. They're basically, you can have a whole game where two players are basically hitting the ice and off the ice at the same time. Whereas with fouling and with like everything else, I mean, obviously you're not going to have two centers on at the same time. There's certain correlations in there, but I don't know. Do you kind of think of it as a relatively randomized process or a high? At least there's. I feel like
More
the
varies.
process contributes a lot of the variation that Audi is talking about.
Yeah, you definitely have more in variance in the NBA. I think you particularly with when you focus on players like Wemby, particularly this season, like he missed games due to injury, or otherwise. I think you can have some trouble when you talk. Adi mentioned sort of garbage time with the Spurs and the Thunder this year. Like Wemby didn't play a lot in late, a ton of minutes because he didn't need to. And so there's a little bit of a question about how impactful those things are. Shea's the same way for OKC. Just didn't have to play a ton in the fourth quarters a lot. So there's load management questions. So you get a lot of variance, but the question is, sort of that late game time is how valuable is that in terms of really measuring true impact.
I just want to observe that bigger picture about OKC. And Ben, your history of OKC goes back. You got some real roots in OKC, if I have it correct. But at last year, rewind a year to Presti and the Thunder winning their first championship and having that young roster and all those additional picks. And everyone's like, oh my God, how many championships are the Thunder going to win? And they still are pretty high expectation for championships. But I don't think anybody would have anticipated that only 1 year later, they may not make the championship round. I mean, it's amazing how little we saw that, how few people saw that happening, because they seemed inevitable for a while after what happened last year, given what they had on their roster and their draft capital.
Yeah, I think San Antonio has, I think, surprised a lot of folks, because I think a couple of things. Wemby sort of accelerated, and took this jump forward that I don't think everybody was expecting. I mean, unanimous defensive player of the year. Everybody thought he was going to be great, and nobody's surprised he's defensive player of the year. But the level at which he's able to control really both ends of the court now, and where teams are like really sometimes just giving up trying to get into the paint if he's there, is another level. And their other young guys have just been Harper during the playoffs has just been tremendous. Cass continues to develop and become a really, really good player. So that young core accelerated faster than I think a lot of folks were expecting. And so they've been, truly, had a great season. It'll be interesting to see how this. I mean, this is the series everybody's been looking for since about midseason. Like, yeah, this is going to be it. This is essentially the championship.
Yeah.
I don't many people believe somebody's going to win other than these two teams. It's a really great start to a great series.
Are you
All
breaking
right,
the Knicks' heart this early? I mean, come on. Is that what you're
I
hearing?
sure. Look, if they get there, they got a chance. Everybody's got a chance.
Yeah.
So let's welcome Eric into the show. Eric just landed on the West Coast and made his way into the show. So glad to have you, Eric. Ben,
Great
let's
to you,
jump to
Ben.
the
I
East.
assume he was talking about the OKC and San Antonio series.
Absolutely.
He is. And we're going to change gears now and talk about the East, because it's been very interesting to us in Philadelphia, especially. One, the Sixers got past the Celtics, and not only that, but in a game 7, which doesn't seem to happen very often. But then they dropped the second round, and with it, we lose our favorite executive in basketball with Daryl Morey. So let's hear first basketball talk. You've got some thoughts on what we saw over the first couple of rounds in the East. And then I am curious to hear your thoughts on Daryl before we wrap up.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the Celtics series with the Sixers was interesting because going in sort of rewinding to earlier in the season, the Celtics were surprising everybody. Jaylen Brown was playing well, though plus minus maybe not quite as strong as the box score metrics. But the team was succeeding and playing really well. And they were going to add Tatum back, and Tatum came back and was great right away. And so they became the prohibitive favorite to win the East, even though they weren't going to be the number 1 seed. And then again they they find that against the Sixers, they had this great game one, then they start to they often lose game two. That's the Celtics' recent history. And they never really got control of the series again after that. And then the game seven, they had a bad shooting night, and it's sometimes hard to overcome that. So it was a tough one for the Celtics to go down. Again, they were missing Tatum in game seven, so they were not full strength, and the Sixers were just overall just not quite good enough. I think the Knicks really they changed their offense to really put Cat in a position to run the offense and be a distributor and really control the offense and allow Brunson to go off and shoot whatever he wanted. They couldn't match, and Anunoby was fantastic in that series as well. So.
Eric wants to jump in, our local Eastern Conference basketball aficionado.
So Ben, when I think about, and I'm going to make a statement, you just say right or wrong, towards winning a championship, I think the Sixers are in the worst position of any team in the NBA. And let me say why. They can't get past the second round. They have $150 million in contracts to Embiid, George, and Maxey. And so what do you do from here?
Have you heard
winning
of
a championship? I didn't say they were the worst team. I said if the goal is to win a championship, how do they get there in less than the next 5 years?
I mean, they have pieces to absolutely build a championship roster. Like they absolutely can do it. They're in a much better position than a lot of these teams. I mean, there's the Kings. These teams exist that are just not good. And the Sixers are they're a good team. They just won a playoff series. They have two young, really strong, good guards. Embiid, you have to decide, at what can you get something of value if you move him, or do you move him and just say, all right, we don't believe we can build around him, and having him come in and out isn't productive. So can you move on from him? Do you get any value from? Don't know. Paul George same way. I don't really know what you can get of value, but you have good, strong pieces that are proven to be effective in the playoffs that are on the team, and it's hard to say you're in the worst position to go try and win a championship when you've got that already on your team. There are teams that really don't have any of that. Which much worse positions.
Well, so on that, from that angle, let's talk about Morey. So Morey ran the Rockets for a while, and now he's run the Sixers for a while. And as so often happens around the world of sports, people will say, I'll take Moneyball seriously when they win a championship. Now Presti's won a championship, and Howie Roseman's pretty close to Moneyball. They've won a championship. Hadn't happened in hockey yet, technically, but here comes Tulski in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll see. But Daryl has that. He suffers from not having that championship. What is your assessment of Harris and ownership letting him go, and what's your assessment of what he accomplished and didn't accomplish in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, look, Daryl is really one of the best executives in the NBA. I mean, when you think about the teams, and a lot of folks associate analytics with Sam Hinkie in the process, and you got to lose to get the draft picks, and so that's the way it's going to be, and that's tanking has been effective for certain teams to get that, and that's fine. But Daryl has taken a different approach. Daryl's approach is, I want to win every year. I want to put a competitive team on the floor every single season, and nowhere was that more evident was when he was in Houston, and the Warriors were clearly the dominant team, and everybody assumed that we're going to be going back to the finals, and we're win another championship, all this, and Steph was at the height of his powers and all of it, and Daryl said, no, I'm going to put together a team to challenge them. We may not, and so he had Harden, he had Chris Paul, and he went after it. And if Chris Paul doesn't pull a hamstring in that series, he probably beats them, and they go on to be in the finals, which they would probably have won, given the strengths of the team. So I think that it's unfortunate, it's bad, unlucky things do happen. I mean, you go, you can point to moments in time and all the time for that could have happened, almost got there, and it's recognition that there's so much luck in the outcome of sports, particularly when it comes to winning a championship. You can't win a championship without luck. I think Haberstroh goes through this great exercise every year, puts an asterisk on the championship, and the NBA championship, and goes through why there should be an asterisk on this team's championship.
I love it.
You go through every single championship and how they got lucky to win, and just happened. Daryl just hasn't gotten that lucky. He's put teams together, certainly been good enough, and he puts teams together to earnestly try and compete every single year, which is, I think from a fan's perspective, something that is, you would love, particularly if you've been suffering through some of these other tankathons in Utah or Washington. They are to have that as a goal, to say, I'm not going to tank, even if I think it might help long term. I'm going to put together a team and win now.
It reminds me of something that Daryl said after Hinkie lost his position with the Sixers. He said something to the effect of, it was like Sam took the fans and the ownership on a long walk into the forest, promising them this great picnic, down the road, but he didn't leave them enough little treats along the way. And what you're saying is Daryl believed in, yes, we're aiming for the long term, but we're going to keep it competitive and entertaining and enjoyable along the way.
But I think it also shows, Cade, which you've talked about a lot, is the massive uncertainty in the draft. You can have a bunch of top picks, and, Embiid worked out. Obviously, Ben Simmons did not work out as well. Markelle Fultz did not work out as well. And, you can say, well, if I had known, I would have stayed with Tatum and the Sacramento pick. Yeah, well, okay, if I had known. I think it highlights the fact that there is still uncertainty in the NBA, even in the NBA draft.
I want to jump in and ask a question about it that really highlights exactly this issue. So this year's draft, I think there's pretty clear what the obvious, it's considered a very deep draft, at least at the top. But there's a statistical versus visual comparison that is making the rounds. Cameron Boozer is got the best stats. It's like when you talk about Rapham numbers, like on and off the court, adjusted plus minus, it's just sick. Yet he's not considered to be the number one or even number two pick this year because of eye test, I think. I mean, or something like that. I mean, maybe you can explain to me, are we really having head to head here between the numbers people and the eye people, who are going to end up making the decisions, as we all know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're often those pairings that go way far back. You have Durant, Odin, and there you had a lot of folks. Obviously the Trailblazers went with Odin, number one overall pick, and left Durant for Seattle. The numbers were really clear that Durant was the guy, and people wanted to try and sort of massage away Odin's lack of productivity for a variety of reasons. In terms of this current class, like and I haven't really dug into it yet in terms of projections and everything, but in terms of playing really well at the college level is not the same thing as being great at the NBA level. Like we've seen plenty of guys who are good at the college level and cannot make it, at the next level. So instead of trying to look at the actual skill levels of different players and then projecting those out and how they can be put together and impact actual NBA performance in the future, like that's what we really need to do. In terms of understanding whether this really is a numbers versus an eye test kind of situation. Again, I haven't done that exercise yet, so I can't comment for sure that that's where we're at. But I mean, there are more and more just from the, there's a growing sense of folks that are actually pushing Boozer even farther down now than even the third pick. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Super interesting, because you're saying it's not just maybe Adi. You said numbers versus eye test, and I think Ben's saying, look, it's not necessarily production. Maybe the better way of thinking about what you said first, Adi, is production. In college football, we talk about it, production stats or whatever. Eye test is historically kind of a pejorative way of like old school scouting. And
Right,
what I'm hearing from Ben is, real quickly, what I think I'm hearing from Ben is identifying the feature that's going to generalize to the NBA, the skill, the trait, or whatever. It's almost a feature building process. And so it's not necessarily stats in college won't necessarily translate, but we think we know the traits. And so but those aren't observed directly. It's like we have to infer them. So do I have that? Am I thinking about that right, Ben?
Yeah, I
mean,
think one of the things
that's what Ben's saying. Go ahead, Ben.
sorry, one of the really great examples I like to point to about that is Hashim Thabit years ago, who was just a dominant defensive force at UConn, and everybody loved him. Everybody we wanted him in OKC. Quite honestly, we tried, like, the numbers loved him, the scouts loved him. It was great, and it just didn't translate to the NBA level. Because there was there's something that I have tried to measure at times in terms of sort of basketball intelligence, basketball IQ that was missing, that you really need at the next level to survive. You can't just do it on the fact that you're dominant physically, whether athletically or size wise. Like, that doesn't if that's what you're relying on to be productive in college, which you can be, then you're not going to survive in the NBA.
Adi and Eric both want to jump in.
Yeah, so I just want to say, I mean, you're talking about latent variables that have a better story and actually have a story, to be quite honest, but are yet very hard to pin down and measure, and we don't even know how they will predict, versus something which has no story whatsoever. It's just a bunch of, it's like adjusted plus minus stats that you have track record on how they do, and you can make forecasts, and that basically you're dealing with a particular. I think Boozer in particular. I think he really is the standout. I mean, and not just in one area or one, he just sticks out. He's only played 1 year in college, but he just was unbelievable. He comes from a legacy. His father was a professional basketball player. I think in some level, maybe his father hurts him because he was not a superstar. He was only merely very good.
Let me tell a quick story. I've never told this story before, and I've never thought about it before, but it's like, this is so appropriate. I was at Duke in the early 2000s. It was my first faculty position. There was a grad student there named Ken Catanella, who'd been, I'm sure, crossed paths with at some point. Ken was an MBA. He had played college basketball, small college basketball, played in Europe some professionally. And when he got to Duke as an MBA, he talked his way onto Coach K's staff in some kind of assistant capacity. He was, as far as I know, I believe this to be true, the first full-time analyst that Coach K ever had at Duke. And while he was there, we started playing with numbers. So this is like, I think he might have been class of 04. So this is 2002, 2003, something like that. So we pulled together, and this is very early stuff, and I'm not a basketball guy. We're like, well, let's do some plus minus. And then and we were really raw, basic plus minus. So this was not the regularized Adi. But I can tell you that Boozer was on that team. Boozer's dad, Carlos Boozer, was on that team. And he was not considered the top player on that team. And there was Sheldon Whitehead. Am I making that name up? There was another big guy they had, Sheldon something.
I think Sheldon Whitehead is the senator from Rhode Island, but
like I said, I am not a basketball guy. So Sheldon, I forget Sheldon's last name. He was considered the bigger force at the time. And they had some others. They had some smaller players as well. Anyway, we run some basic plus minus numbers, and we're like, well, are these right? Because Boozer kind of jumps out, and it's like, what are we doing here that's right or wrong? Because we didn't expect Boozer to be the one that was head and shoulders above. And two things about that. One, Boozer's the one who went on to have the better professional career than his fellow big man that he's playing college ball with.
Sheldon Williams, by the way.
Sheldon Williams, there you go. Sheldon Williams. Thank you, Eric, very much.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, Boozer was drafted in the second round and had a high first round career.
Yeah, no, he had a perfectly an NBA career, which says something. And The other thing about that I love about that story is that it's models at its best. Models at their best see around the corner. They see the future a little bit better. They tell you something you didn't necessarily know, and we definitely had that experience with that early rough stuff. Catanella went on to a long-time NBA career. He was an executive NBA for many years. NBA teams. Super interesting, super good guy. Okay, fellas, we're going to need to wrap up and let Ben go. Ben, always a pleasure having you. Very enlightening. Give us something. We've played one game in this Western Conference Finals. We play at least 3 more, maybe 6 more. What do you think is one thing we're going to be saying at the end of the Western Conference Finals that we're not saying right now? It's easy to overreact to one game, right? So what do you think might occur between now and the end of this saying that we're not anticipating properly?
I think first I'm going to lose a lot more sleep because I think the games are going to, I think we're going to go 7. I think we're going to go long, and I think it's going to be great for that. But I think that I think the question is Wemby had this historic, defensive performance and offensive, his overall, like, I mean, it was Wilt-like numbers, crazy. Can he keep that up? That's the question. Can he perform at that level? Because they absolutely needed him to win that game, because they were about to lose that game, and then he makes 2 plays at the end of regulation, keeps them alive, and then dominates in both overtime periods. So that's a lot of minutes. He hasn't played. He doesn't normally play that many minutes. Let's see if he can keep that up. If he can, then man, they could actually dethrone the Thunder. But it seems like what it's going to take for them to do that.
Ben's here. I'll make a statement just in 5 seconds. I think we'll be talking about that SGA is not that great a 2-time MVP. I think he's going to have a lot of trouble against the athletes I think he had a bad night last night, and I think Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox when he comes back, and Vassell, I think SGA is going to have some trouble in this series. I get to make a prediction. That's my prediction. That's what I'm talking about.
That's fair. They got the guys to run at him for sure.
My question is going to be in what ways then OKC adapts, because this is the thing about high-end basketball in these 7-game series is that one team will adapt to the other, and so they are very smart. This is what they're doing, and there'll be some at least attempt to adapt to what they experienced in game 1. That the qualification is, look, they played them in the regular season. It's not like this was brand new information. Okay, team, why don't we let Ben go? Again, Ben Alamar, longtime friend of the show, former ESPN and basketball analyst, basketball author, Ben Alamar. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks
Come back and join us after the break. Welcome back. Welcome back to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome back to a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. We are rolling into the second half of the show. Shane Jensen is here. Adi Wyner is here. This is Cade Massey. Eric Bradlow flew in for a bit. We'll see if we get him back for part of the second half of the show. We are recording on Tuesday afternoon, as we typically do. Show will go up early Wednesday. Just off the line with Ben Alamar. Ben's based down in here in Austin with me. He's a former ESPN guy. Fun little perspective on the NBA. I need that. I need that expert perspective on the NBA. We're going to go open lines in this half, and we are going to get Eric Bradlow back, which is awesome. We'll do a little catch your eye, what caught your eye. But before we do that, a quick shout out. Big thank you to Stephanie Lanasa and her family. Stephanie's Wharton 2000 grad. They made a generous gift to Wasabi after listening to the podcast. It's kind. We appreciate it. Helps us do the work, not just this show, but the work we do with students around school. Also want to note that the Lanasas have a son, Ajax, one of their children, Ajax. He is committed to play golf at UCLA. Not this next year. He's got one more year of high school, but beginning in 2027, be golfing at UCLA. And, this is the time of year where the NCAA tournament's about to start. And
great shout out, Cade. I think maybe a lot of our listeners don't know that everything that we do at Wharton AI and Analytics, but also obviously Wasabi, is fully funded through philanthropy, corporate partners, and foundations. And without that type of support, the show doesn't exist. All the things that you and Adi and everyone is running at Wharton don't exist. So very much appreciated.
Stephanie Lanasa and Ajax, their son. Look forward to talking about college golf in the future. All right, guys, why don't we open it up? Lots of things going on. Let's do a couple of rounds of what caught your eye. I'm curious where you will take us. Why don't we start with our friend in Israel on 36 hours travel, no sleep, before he nods off mid half hour. Adi, what do you
I'm
got?
happy to do so. I'm actually going to mix two things. So I want to talk about hotness because it's caught my eye. The hotness is the Philadelphia Phillies, who had lost 10 games in a row, got a new manager, and now look like a different team. So that's one data point. The second data point is the Yankees, who look incredible for the first 40 games of the season, now look just, I would say, lost, and have lost. They've lost the majority of the games they've played this last week. So that leads me to what is this thing called hotness? And the reason why it caught me on my eye in particular is that I was revisiting an old paper of Gilowich, Tversky, and Valone, which is the classic paper called The Hot Hand Fallacy. And I wanted to kind of figure out, well, what do people think? Where is the academic literature on hot hand
Adi,
these days?
I don't know if you know, but myself and your now former department chair, or soon to be former department chair, Dylan Small, we have a paper on the hot hand. We have a paper that shows that the Gilovich and Tversky and Valone paper actually uses a very low power statistic to detect the hot hand. So we created a much more powerful one. And so we reanalyzed their data and a lot of other data sets and showed that there is a hot hand. It's not a massive effect size, but now that paper's now 10 plus years old. And that led to, yeah.
So I'll comment because my old professor from Stanford, Joe Romano, and one of his students, they revisited that data as well. And they actually did something which I had noticed with one of my students when he was an undergraduate, and we never published it, was that in that paper, there was hotness when analyzed correctly, but it could be attributed almost entirely to one particular player who was absurdly hot, so absurdly hot that if you put him in, you have a statistically significant hotness. If you take him out, you don't. And so it's fascinating because there are so many takes on the hot hand, and some are underpowered, as
I'm going to
you
say
point
something
out.
that the three of you will appreciate about this whole research stream, because it's the work that you guys have done in sports and methodology. So what we did, Adi, and Shane, Cade, you guys will all appreciate this. We took this exact measure that we created for sports and just applied it to purchasing behavior in marketing and video consumption in marketing. So do people start binge consuming content? Do people have hyper state dependence where they start buying products at a hyper rate? So we literally took exactly the metric that we created for sports and directly applied it to marketing. And actually, it's now up to my second most cited paper. We didn't call it hotness, we called it clumpiness, because I didn't want to have a positive or negative valence. But this is a paper, well, you guys remember, your former PhD student in stat, Yao Zhang, worked with Dylan and I on this work. And it was revisiting the Gilovich and Valone Tversky paper. And then it was revisiting customer lifetime value work, which a lot of it assumes that people buy at a constant rate, which is not true. And so there's actually a very active literature on it. It's kind of rebirthed.
So this also helps us understand Eric's love of momentum, I suppose, on this show.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just want to note that I
we can
forgot
get
the
back.
name. There were a couple of economists, statisticians who I got a lot of attention for challenging the methodology of Tversky et al. And is it Tversky or Gilovich that first author on that?
Gilovich.
I should know that, and I don't. Okay, so it's Tom Gilovich. So we had that one of those co-authors on the show. I have to add the behavioral element here at the end before we let go. I like what Eric said. He found a hot hand, but it's a very small effect. The behavioral claim would be, no matter what size is actually there, the belief is much larger than the actuality. That's the behavioral piece of it that I would add on top of these things.
So I guess what I'm kind of saying is that we see like what the Phillies have done. It's very hard to explain that without some kind of hotness, right? I mean, obviously you can explain it, but it's hard to. And if you go back to the marketing, as all my children would say, They call me Abba. When Abba's in a spending mood, they know it's time to get on that gravy train. I get in that zone.
I've never been on that train. I've never seen the Adi spending mode. Are you
No,
kidding
it's
me?
extremely rare. But when that thing ticks on, it's like, what happens? It's like a new person.
So, Adi, just because you brought this topic up, I'll be a business person just for a second, because we're also a business show a little bit. So what we also addressed in the paper is, should you encourage people to binge consume or develop a hot hand when it comes to spending? And so we actually studied that. What we did was we had an in-sample period where we ran an experiment. We encouraged people to hyper buy, and then we measured their customer lifetime value over a subsequent 6 months out of sample period. And so a separate paper we wrote was in, our big quant marketing journal, Marketing Science, which is, should you try to make your customers binge consume and clumpy, and is it good for economic value in the long run? It turns out it is, by the way, but that was purely an experiment run on top of this metric that we created as opposed to the lower power ones. And then we showed that there's actually business value to encourage people to go into the Adi Wyner hot state.
I'm pretty sure that whoever runs DraftKings and FanDuel's read your paper, Eric, because it's an ad blitz, let's just say, happening for any of us watching live sports out there right now.
Right. Well, Shane, while you got it, why don't you carry on? What had caught your eye in the world of sports the last week?
Well, I guess this kind of relates to the kind of momentum hotness sort of theme. I mean, I'm really intrigued, obviously, for the upcoming round for the NHL playoffs, and specifically here in the East with the Hurricanes, going into an 11-day break, basically, as hot as a playoff team can be, 8-0, but then having 11 days off while Montreal and Buffalo battled it out. And obviously rest and all that is a great thing. And if I could be on either team, I'd probably rather prefer to be in Carolina's situation. But it does beg kind of like, to the extent that there's a temporal momentum, whatever you want to call it, to what was going on with the Hurricanes before this big break. Has that dissipated, or are they going to keep going? I guess that's kind of the question on my mind.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, Shane. So what would you have to observe to say that maybe the break was too long? Because let's just say, for example, the Hurricanes win 4-3. Well, maybe that's what it would have been anyway. Like, how do you look at the counterfactual in this case? Like, I think if they get blown out in 4, you might say, wow. I mean, I'm not saying statistical evidence, but what would be a narrative that you would have to see to say that?
I think I'd have to see some kind of like, not just like, not even them losing the series, I suppose, in a blowout would be some evidence, but like you'd want to kind of look, I think, at the underlying sort of measurables and sort of see, puck possession, like all these kind of other things, and see if they're really kind of lagging on, to the extent that those are sort of like some kind of, I think that's where you'd really, I think, see the compelling evidence for like some kind of like, rust kind of story.
That's an interesting question. Like what reflects rust in hockey? That's interesting. I would also add they have to, that for that story to hold, they have to lose game 1. That 100% have to lose.
You have
game
to.
1.
No, you have
and
to.
really, you probably ought to lose more than 1 if that story's going to hold. But Mark Messier is an analyst on ESPN, and they had him on after the game last night, and he talked about exactly this issue. He said back in the 80s, they had some kind of playoff round against the Flyers, and he said his team. I don't know if this was the Oilers or the Rangers. When did
it was the Oilers?
Oilers that
It
early.
to be the Oilers. He didn't move to the Rangers.
Yeah, the Oilers. I mean, just
this was the finals. He had a 10-game break before the finals against the Flyers.
Yeah, I think because if it was like in 87, 88, they actually, I think, for at least a 4-game for the current hockey structure, they have the record. They went 16-2, I think, in that playoff run.
Of course, they had swept everybody. They waited.
Basically, they'd gone through whoever was out in the West, and we're just waiting for the Flyers in the final.
So Messier said last night, he's like, look, you come back and you feel a little cement-legged, but you get a 10-day break in the middle of the season, and that all season long, you never get that break. It's like an entirely new season. You could tell in the way he was talking about it. He said flat out, he said the Canadians are up against it. This is and this was after, of course, talking flatteringly about the two teams that had just played. Because like it was clear to him. I think it's clear to Messier that's like this is a big disadvantage, which is the way we talked about it last week as well. I mean, look, it's not even only just about this series. They're already big favorite in this series. That break is going to help them in the finals if they make the finals. I mean, they got better rest than the Avs did if the Avs make it through. A quick lamentation for the Sabres. That was a great series. It was, it was Game 7 overtime. That's just the best thing in hockey. And it was the second series clinching game that I watched where it feels like the team that won got outplayed. And they had this overtime goal. This was the Flyers against the Pens, overtime goal in Game 6. Friggin' Canadians against the Sabres, overtime goal again. I mean, the Sabres had pounded them for at least, the last two periods of regulation. They got outplayed probably in
that hot
itself.
goaltender, man. I think to the extent that we've got a hot goaltender in this playoff, it's the one in Montreal.
Well, shout out to Sam Ventura, our friend from Carnegie Mellon, who runs R&D for the Sabres. And by any lights, that's a great season. They second round they seem like they're back. They have a young team. There's just kids out there for that team.
I think Montreal. I think I heard that Montreal and Buffalo actually are the two youngest teams in the league. That's pretty incredible that they were playing.
They look like it on the ice. It looks like I'm watching my nephews, little baby nephews, out there playing hockey. All right, Eric, what do you got?
So I was thinking about golf, and I was thinking about Aaron Rai winning the PGA, but I thought about it more broadly. Like, name me a sport where the 40-somethingth ranked player in the world wins the title. So in basketball, I know there's not 40-something teams, but like there's no chance next season, for example, like the Sacramento Kings are winning. In tennis, the 40-somethingth ranked player is not winning the French Open. The 40-somethingth ranked horse is not winning the Belmont. So I started to think this is why I love golf, because you go into these tournaments and it could be 50, 60, 70 guys that could win the tournament. And that's the wonderful thing. And it gets part of the momentum. I thought where Adi was going to go with his momentum story earlier, or when baseball too. In golf, you've talked about this, Cade. You get locked in. And if you get locked in for one weekend, you can win a major. And Danny Willett won the Masters. I mean, look at Danny Willett. Danny Willett won the Masters. And I'm just saying, you get these situations where it can happen. And that's what I thought about, is like, in what other sport could the 40-somethingth ranked player not only win, but won by 3 strokes? That was what caught my eye.
Eric,
let me just follow up with that.
Does it make Scheffler's performance over the last couple of years even more impressive? Does it make it even more impressive when one guy does so well over a long period of time? Because
it does.
That shouldn't happen, right? That shouldn't happen in what you just described.
Well, 2 other things, and I know Adi wants to jump in. 2 other things. So Scheffler is an interesting situation because, and this isn't a bad thing I'm about to say, his wins and loss record when he's in contention is starting. He's young. He's 29. Is starting to look more and more like Nicklaus than it is Woods. And let me say why I'm saying that. People know Jack Nicklaus has the record for 18 majors, right? He won 18. That's the all-time record. Do you know how many seconds Nicklaus has?
Also all-time
record.
It's 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And Tiger Woods has 15 wins, 2, 3. Like, Tiger Woods is in contention. Tiger Woods wins. You guys know this stat. He's like leading after 3 rounds. He's like 54-2 in his career. Jack Nicklaus doesn't have that record. I'm starting to see, this is not a problem. I'd rather be Scottie Scheffler than any other golfer right now, even than Rory McIlroy. I'm not saying McIlroy doesn't have a better accomplished record right now. Scottie Scheffler had a bad week as far as I'm concerned. He ended up 15th? I mean, that's as bad as he can play. As bad as he can play. He missed 6 putts. I saw him miss 6 putts, 6 feet or less. He makes those putts. He's in it. So, and the worst he can play, he's top 15. That's the worst he can play.
Yeah. So my comment is that one of the things that the reason why this happens is if you divide a golf performance into 3 components. So it's almost like the 4 factors, but for golf. You have the tee shot, you have the approach shot, and you have your putting. And you sort of Z-score your performance or strokes gained your Z-scores on each of those components. And you ask, well, we've talked about this in the show a lot. The tee shots and the approach shots, the players are really different. They're quantifiably very, very different. Their skill levels are vast and they're important. And in putting, they're very, very compressed. But if you had only one of those to predict who wins the tournament, which one would you want? If you only could pick one,
we know
which
this.
one would you?
It's
Yeah,
putting.
it's like
It's
the
putting. It's putting.
Yeah.
And so that's the component that has the least amount of skill or skill variation. I mean, I don't want to say it's not skill. I can't do it. You guys can't do it.
Skill variation.
Skill variation is the thing that determines the outcome so frequently. And so you get this 40th person because of that peculiarity of golf.
Interesting. All right. Let me give you one, and then we'll do another round, and I'll pass on the second round since I've been kibitzing on it. But I'm going to come back to hockey. I was thinking about this last night, and this is something to put up against y'all. Y'all react to this. It feels to me like hockey is, in some sense, the most exciting sport. And I was trying to operationalize it in my head last night. There's not much scoring, as Adi referred in, earlier, and so the win probability change from a score is pretty high relative to other sports. Certainly huge compared to basketball. I'm curious, it's probably a little bit higher than baseball, but scoring is comparable to baseball. It's probably a little lower than soccer. Soccer's even bigger. It's got to be higher than NFL. So the win probability change when a goal occurs
that's a great point.
is big. But here's the thing. That combined with the fact that the trajectory from the zero chance of a goal to a goal happens faster than it has to be any other sport. Like maybe with a pitcher and a home run, that's the closest thing to it. But the guy can go from the far end of the ice where there's no chance that a goal is about to happen to being high goal expectancy. Well, at least goal region in just seconds. And it goes back and forth like this all the time. You go from like utterly risk of a goal happening, which is going to lead to this big change in win probability, to no risk and negative risk. The other team with the high risk of win probability.
When Montreal was
I think that vacillation. When Montreal
was up 2-0 in the game last night early on, what was the win probability? I'm just interested. Like in the first period up 2, was it like 80%?
I doubt it would have been 80, but especially
80 would be an upper bound on what I would probably put that probability at. If but
sure, 70s, 75.
Yeah, between 60 and 80, certainly between 60 and 80.
And that's this extremeness, and then once it's 2-1, well, then all of a sudden, it's 55, 60% maybe. And then when it's 2-2, I'm a momentum guy. I'd say, well, the Buffalo's more likely to win.
But do y'all buy my operationalization of that? Can we compare sports that way?
Yeah.
And ask about something about the volatility of win probability. It just seems
over
more
time,
compressed, higher frequency.
Divided by time. I think it's like a derivative thing.
Right.
By time.
Yeah. The instantaneous change in win probability is probably highest in hockey, or potentially
something
high.
Like that.
I would think, Cade, that if I was, starting a sports network or thinking about this, and I was thinking about fan experience, the metric you just created is probably one that would be very interesting to look at and probably generates a lot of excitement.
Well, the qualifier on it is that you probably don't get huge jumps because goals don't happen with very high probability. So we're talking about it's moving around like this, but it's going on both sides of the 0.5 line with high frequency. Okay, let's do another quick round. Let's go back around to Shane. Or no, Adi started us off.
Okay.
If you haven't been watching whatever local sports you have,
I haven't. I don't have any quick takes.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Don Mattingly. Did we know
question.
he was going to be a success? Tell me about his managerial background. I mean, I don't think about Don Mattingly since he was been a player, but I'm sure I'm just out of it.
No, he is an accomplished manager, and not only obviously an accomplished player and an accomplished manager. I think what just connecting on this point is, and in managerial prowess in general in baseball, it's something that I have a hard time understanding how much it's valued. I mean, we've talked about this because it's in some level the set of strategic moves that you get to make as a manager in baseball is so much smaller than the things that you get to do in other sports. Particularly sports like hockey and basketball, you have all these combinations that you get to decide upon. And when people come out and all that changing of players, and strategically you have the manager in soccer manages what kind of team that they want to build, and the whole team is built around that manager's understanding of the strategic design. Baseball's like, really, what are you really doing? In the old days, you had more to do because they also were in some level very involved in player acquisition and termination decisions. But here, we just don't see it yet. Somehow just you see this Mattingly effect. And I'm probably, if you had to ask me where I stand on it, I'm essentially saying very, very minor factor. This is due to other factors, of which a big helping of which is luck and regression to the mean. The Phillies were a good team. And that someone asked me, what's the Mattingly effect? And my first response is, clearly it's regression to the mean. When you make the change, when you are at the worst, that's when things were so horrible and so unexpectedly horrible that you made the change then. And then therefore my prediction for the Phillies in their next 2 weeks after the managerial change was going to be much higher, simply because of the cherry picking, the tragedy, the moment.
And said you had the paired comparison. The Red Sox fired their manager in about the same time and have gotten no better.
But they weren't as bad.
By the way,
did they have a 10-game losing streak? Right. I don't think so.
Also, I feel like you were only talking about the manager in terms of on-field kind of strategic decision-making contribution, not the behind the scenes getting the players to play their best. And that one's the fast. I think managers can have a big effect there. It's fascinating though, because Rob Thompson, who was the one fired, came in and did that exact thing to the same team basically like 3 whatever years ago. And somehow, so I kind of feel like that refresh often works, but it's weird to me.
Doesn't that just suggest that you need an occasional refresh? That manager-player relations kind of get stale at some
Adi and I are waiting for Aaron Boone, but Adi, just quickly.
Yes, we are waiting for him.
Just quickly, by the way, let's pretend, this is probably an overestimate, but just pretending that the Phillies were a 600 team to start the season, it's probably an overestimate, but just roughly. I just did the calculation. They've gone 18-4 under Mattingly. There's a 1.13% chance that they would do that as a 600 team, straight from a binomial tail probability. So it's rare, and we have to give something to it, but it's not like you would never see a team go this. Like this is a rare stretch, but it's not a rare stretch.
Yeah, but the 10-game in a row stretch was incredible. To put them back to back, and you get something that's really worth noting.
To lose 10 in a row and then to go 18-4, that's a little different.
0.6 to the 10th is really small.
Shane, last word on Mattingly and your Phillies?
Well, I'll keep it with the Phillies. I just kind of saw that actually, just because we're fascinated with the ABS, I saw that Bryce Harper actually lost a challenge in the statistically worst possible situation.
Yeah.
So the context was bases empty, 0-0 count, 2 outs in the first inning. And so it's like, and it just kind of fascinating. I mean, that it makes sense that would be the worst possible combination. I feel like we're not tracking contact, obviously the hitters or whatever are making their decision based on whether they really thought it was in the zone or not. I wonder if there is any kind of learning for context that can actually.
Well, I actually studied this a little bit. I'm not sure you were on when I gave my results about the tracking, about the ABS, the tapping. The analysts are tracking basically what I call run expectancy flip. And what you're pointing out here is that the run expectancy flip was so small here, even at stake, so little was at stake, that the future loss because of the expected value, given how early in the game is, that's the piece that people are not tracking properly. I think what's happening is that hitters like Harper are given essentially the green light.
Yeah.
And that's the way they're dealing with it. And hitters like, Jazz Chisholm are being told you don't ever challenge, because you see him, you watch him hit, and he's like, oh, at this point, what the hell's going on in my head?
I feel like Jazz is the opposite side of the spectrum from Angel Hernandez or something like that.
But shouldn't
have both have the same amount of judgment?
Shouldn't the clubs, at the very minimum, you could imagine telling a batter as they leave the
Yes.
on deck circle, you have the green light or you have a red light.
Absolutely.
It's like it's just a game situation at the batter at the at bat level. It should be real clear that a guy can do it or can't do it, right?
Absolutely. My suspicion is that someone like Harper is given the green light to
But
do
he
whatever
should be given
wants.
the
He
even
shouldn't
Harper
be.
shouldn't have the green light
No.
in that moment. But it's not surprising that Bryce Harper is the one that makes that decision, especially Bryce Harper playing like he's been playing. He's on top of the world. He runs the world. Let me do whatever I want to do, kind of thing. And there needs to be a check on that. Okay, that was Shane's second one. Eric Bradlow.
Just
what caught your
quickly,
eye?
because I know we're heading up on time here. All right. Very sad moment for me today because you guys know how much I love tennis. Alcaraz has already said, he just announced today he's not playing the entire grass court season. So he's out of Wimbledon. He's out of Queen's Club. So he's not playing, obviously, the French. He's not playing Wimbledon. I'm doing this. I don't care what anyone says. I'm putting asterisks next to Sinner's season now. You know, he's now broken the record for the most Masters 1000 wins in a row, broke Djokovic's record, 36 in a row, and he's won 5 straight Masters events. He's now only the second player, shockingly, to win all the Masters 1000. I never realized that Federer and Nadal, neither of them won them all.
How many are there?
There's 8, and Sinner's won them all now at age 24.
Eric, real quickly, give us the 8 Master 1000s tournaments.
Oh, I don't know them all. I mean, I could tell you there's a couple in the clay court season. The Italian Open was just one of them. There's one in Spain that takes place. Like Indian Wells is one of them. You know, basically every surface has, like, call it 2 of them. They have the Grand Slam, which you might as well call the 2000 tournament, 'cause that is the number of points. And then there's like 2 of each other type. There's 2 hard court ones. There's 2 grass ones. There's 2 clay ones.
And they're geographically distributed as well. Like, how many are in the States?
I would say 2 or 3 of them. Oh, you know what's Cincinnati, I think, is one of them, one of the Indian Wells. There might be 3 in the States, maybe 1 in Australia, 2 or 3 in Europe, something like that.
Okay.
But look, Sinner would have to play. It's not even his B game. He has, injury could do it, obviously. Alcaraz got injured. But if Sinner's healthy, this is going to end up being one of the greatest seasons in the history of tennis. By far. I mean, it is. He can't win the Grand Slam this year because he didn't win the Australian. But he may win every other tournament that he plays. So I'm just sad from a fan's perspective. And I don't want to have to put an asterisk next to his name. But if he cleans up, if Alcaraz doesn't play the rest of the season and Sinner cleans up 3 Grand Slams and now he's at 7 and Alcaraz is at 7, I'm not feeling good about it. All
right. It's that you've been giving us a bit of a heads up on that one for a couple of weeks now. So it's coming to home to roost at this point. All right, guys, why don't we let it wrap there? We'll get Adi off to bed. Thanks for making it in here, and to you, Eric, on your travels, sliding in here. And many thanks to Shane Jensen, who has just slipped away. Big thanks to the debut production performance of Jacob Grodnick and his team, the Grod Squad, on the engineering platform for us this time, and presumably going forward for a while. So glad to have these guys in. Thanks to Deep Patel for making this whole thing run. Thanks to you guys for listening. Oh, and thanks to Marissa Reyna, our producer. Thanks to you guys for listening. Come back and join us next time. Between now and then, enjoy your sports.